Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John. I am the event coordinator at Murder by the Book, and I'm super excited about tonight's event. But before we get into it and bring Lori and Amy out, I'll make some just general store announcement stuff to let you guys know what has been going on with us lately. We are open, so if you haven't come to visit, you're welcome to come in. No appointment needed. We're not limiting the number of people in the store, but we are asking that if you do come visit us, you mask up. For the sake of all of our customers, with kids not being able to get vaccinated yet and us having a large population of our customers that visit us who are getting treatment at MD Anderson, we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable in the store. So for the moment, that means masking up while you come to visit us. We know that some people are not getting out and about. So if you prefer curbside pickup, you can always just give us a call when you are heading our way or when you pull into the parking lot. We're happy to run books out to the car, pop them in the trunk for you. So definitely give us a shout. And again, we're always happy to recommend books over the phone and drop stuff in the mail. We're still offering our free media mail shipping on all of our orders over $75. You don't need a code for that. Once your order hits $75 in the shopping cart, the free shipping option will automatically pop up. We've got a lot of great events coming up. I think other than next Tuesday, we've got pretty much something every day for the rest of October. Tomorrow night, we're going to be chatting with James Hahn Matson. Steph Cha is going to be back to be interviewing him. Next Wednesday, we're going to be chatting with Steph Mullen and Nicole Mabry about their new book. Megan Collins will be interviewing them. And I'm super excited for next Thursday. Some of you may remember that last month when BoucherCon got canceled, the Crime Writers of Color were supposed to have an underrepresented voices panel at BoucherCon. And we were so excited to be able to partner with them and bring some form of it to the virtual world and do that. Because of that, we have been chatting with the Crime Writers of Color and Kelly Garrett and Alex Segura, and we are launching an every other month reading series with them. Alex and Kelly are going to be hosting it every month, picking themes and getting the authors involved. So our first theme is going to be Edge of Your Seat Thrillers, and that is going to be next Thursday at 7 o'clock. So we hope that you will come back and check that out. It should be a lot of fun. They've got a really great lineup, and they're just so entertaining. I'm excited that we essentially get to host like a TV show for them every 2 months. So definitely come back for that. And you can always check murderbooks.com for the full list of author events that we've got coming up. I think we are pretty much done getting things on the calendar for 2021. We're going to continue with the virtual stuff for the rest of the year. We might do some kind of Murder by the Book recommends actually in store for Small Business Saturday. We're still kind of playing with that. So keep an eye on the newsletter for that. And we're hoping in 2022 we can get some authors back in the store again. I think we're just waiting to kind of see how the holidays go. But I think that is all of my general store announcement stuff. So I'm going to get us started tonight. We're so excited to have Lori Rader-Day here with us virtually. And her new book, Death at Greenway, just came out Tuesday, and we've got signed book plates to go with our copies. Let's bring her out. How are you tonight, Lori?
I'm doing great. How are you, John?
I'm good. Congratulations on the new book.
Thank you so much.
It feels like, everything feels like it was forever ago, but it feels like it was forever ago when you announced that you were writing this, and we've been so excited about it. I can't believe the day is finally here that the book is out for people.
John, it has been forever ago for me. Absolutely forever ago since this book started. Yeah.
So as I mentioned, Death at Greenway just came out on Tuesday, and Lori Rader-Day is the author of Death at Greenway, The Lucky One, Under a Dark Sky, The Day I Died, Little Pretty Things, and The Black Hour. She's a 3-time Mary Higgins Clark Award nominee, winning the award in 2016, and she lives in Chicago. We're also excited, as Amy had said beforehand, we're missing our annual get to catch up with her, but we're super excited to have Amy Stewart with us tonight, who writes the fantastic Kopp Sisters books. How are you tonight, Amy?
Hello, it's good to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's good to see you, even if we're just catching up virtually.
I know. I love coming to Houston. I'm a native Texan, and I was coming there every year until this started. So I really miss it.
Yeah. So hopefully we can get things back on track, and we'll be able to get you here when the next one comes out. But the most recent book in the Kopp Sisters series, which is number 7, which also seems impossible that we're up to number 7, is Miss Kopp Investigates, and it came out on September 7th.
Yes.
And Amy Stewart is the New York Times bestselling author of the acclaimed Kopp Sisters series, which began with Girl Waits with Gun. Her 6 nonfiction books include The Drunken, Botanist, and Wicked Plants, and she lives in Portland, Oregon. So while Amy and Lori are chatting this evening, if you guys watching out there have any questions for them, either about new books, previous books, writing process, any of that stuff, please post those in the live chat on YouTube or the comments on Facebook, and we will get to those in a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to turn it over to you, Lori and Amy, and let you guys chat, and I will see you in just a little bit.
Thanks, John. I hope no one asks about our writing process, because that is going to be a messy conversation. Well, we'll take those questions. We'll take them, but the answers might not be pleasing to some. Amy, I'm just so excited to talk with you. I sat through an MWA Midwest meeting that you did for them, I believe, about poison plants. And I took a bunch of screenshots because I was just enjoying, I don't know, everything that you had to say. I don't have no plans for, poison botany, but it was just really interesting. So I just decided that we needed to be friends. That's what this is about.
Yeah. I know. The great thing about doing these kind of virtual events is that I get to talk to people and see people that I don't get to see in real life much, but it does make me miss the afterwards, let's go to a bar and, keep the conversation going for a couple more hours. The camaraderie is so great.
I miss the mystery.
That Wicked Plants thing, it's so funny. So I wrote these books about poisonous plants and poisonous bugs, and I started getting asked by crime fiction conferences to speak about how to kill your characters with plants and bugs. And it was like, oh, I actually have some really good ideas of how we can kill people. You're
like, I've got plans for you. I know what you need to do.
Yes, exactly.
Well, we're not going to go into that much detail about it, but if anybody's watching and needs to kill off characters, that book is fascinating and just delightful. You're a delightful person generally. That's what I am here to say, because your author newsletter is the only author newsletter that I signed up for and read, and actually will save it in my inbox until I can read it.
Thank you.
I mean, that's big. I think that's huge. If anybody's watching, sign up for Amy Stewart's author newsletter, because it's just charming, and you're a well-rounded person, I have to say. This is one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I kind of resisted having a newsletter, or I always resist anything like that authors are told they're supposed to do. But one day I just sort of had a vision for it. I was like, oh, I could just be myself, and I could just write about a bunch of stuff that's interesting to me, and maybe it's interesting to other people, and it'll just be once a month, and it'll just be whatever. So it's everything from here's this thing at Trader Joe's that is pretty good if you melt some cheese on top of it, that might be in the newsletter. Seriously, it could just be anything. So that's cool. I'm glad you read it. I'm glad somebody reads it.
I do read it.
Cool.
You are a writer, but you're also a painter. You're also you're into the botany, the poisonous plants, also the drinking plants, I believe, right?
Yes, right. The Drunken Botanist.
Drunken Botanist. I'm jealous of that, because I feel like I have sort of narrowed myself down to this one thing that I do. And I think it was just refreshing to see that it's possible to be more than a crime writer, as well as an interesting person. I've been enjoying that. But I did want to bring up one thing that you said in your newsletter that I think is going to set you off, that if anyone's watching who's a writer or a published author, we talk a lot about author brand. And you talked recently about how you just aren't interested in that concept. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I hate that idea. I hate that. The word just brings all my hackles up. I can't stand the idea. When you think, let's think about the word brand, right? So what is a brand? I mean, one thing a brand is a piece of metal that's used to sear an insignia into an animal to show who owns it. That's horrifying. And then the other thing that a brand is it's when a corporation wants to have a line of products that are related, like Tylenol, products or Crest toothpaste products. That's a brand. Like, what does that possibly have to do with us as human beings? Like, how can a person have be like that in any way? So I think that's horrifying. It always used to bother me. And then I saw Denzel Washington in an interview saying, your brand is that you're good. And I was like, yes, that is the thing. Like be good at your thing, and everything else will come, and focus on that. So yeah, no, the whole brand thing makes me crazy, and I just refuse. Like I've as a writer switched topics a lot, and you're right. I have a lot of different interests, and I do a lot of different things, and I just think that's who we are as people. We're so complicated and multifaceted, and I don't want to be one thing. But I will also say, anyone who works in the arts, whether you're a painter or a musician, whatever you are, there's an entertainment industry around you. It could be the publishing industry, it could be the gallery system for artists, or it could be Hollywood. And that industry knows how to sell what it knows how to sell. So that industry will tell you, make more of this thing that sold well. We know how to sell that. But that doesn't mean that it's where you're meant to go as an artist in your life, because the industry can't see that. How could they? It's okay that they can't. They're not meant to. All they know how to do is to sell the thing they're good at selling. I was sitting next to a country singer one night at a dinner in Nashville. He was kind of my age, in his 40s at the time. And he was like, I don't really want to do country. I always wanted to be a big band singer. I want to sing the American Songbook. But my label doesn't want me to do it. My manager doesn't want me to do it. And I'm like, dude, they're not against you doing it. They just don't know how to sell that thing. Like, you're having this conversation with people who know how to sell country music. They're doing the best they can, but they don't know how to do that. You're going to have to go get different people for this. It's okay. Do the thing follow your heart. Do the thing you're meant to do.
Well, and this coincides with one more thing from your author newsletter, and then we'll talk about, other things. But
okay, good.
You wrote something, I can't remember the order of things. You wrote it in your newsletter, you linked it to something you had written on your blog about this very issue, that they're tangentially to this issue. Like, no one knows your career or cares about your career as much as you do.
Yeah.
Can you catch people up? Because I loved that piece that you wrote.
Right. Well, I think what I was talking about is the fact that you are the only person who's going to be in your career from the first day to the last day. Yeah. You're the only one. Everybody else is going to come and go. So there's a woman, a guitarist, who died recently, and I'm sorry to say that I never knew her. I never knew who she was when she was alive, but I read her obituary. And she at one time left her record label, and she said, what I don't like about the record label is it's people in temporary jobs making permanent decisions about your career.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Everyone who comes in and out of your career is just passing through. They're just there for a little while, and they're going to go on and do something else. The irony is you are also just passing through their career, right?
Right.
But you are the one who's going to be there on the last day. You're the one who's going to turn the lights out on this thing, when and if that day comes. So I just think it's important to, we have to be in charge of our own fate, and we have to be in charge. We have to steer the ship, because everybody else is just here for a little while, and then they're going on to their next thing.
I love that. That really resonated with me. Not that I don't have great people working, right. Not that you haven't had great people right. working on your career, but it just really resonated that it does, like, the person who really needs to be happy with the projects you're working on is you. You have to be the one who is happy with how things are going. And the reason why that resonated so much with me is because, here we are, segue.
Okay, good. Here comes the segue.
Here comes the segue, everyone. Hello. Death at Greenway is my first historical. It's not that different. It's a Laurie Rader-Day branded book, but it is different. And I'm not sure if it's any direction exactly. Like, this is the path, this is the turn I'm taking, right. and I'm going to go that direction from here on out. So people who are asking later on if I'm going to write another historical, there's your answer. I don't know.
Another historical that's set in the vacant house of a crime fiction writer from the past. See, there's going to be a whole bunch of these. I mean, You can do Mary Roberts Reinhardt. She had a lot of nice houses that she was probably absent from, and so other people could go there, and then a body can turn up. I'm sure there's, if we really drill into this, I think we can think of lots of crime writers with homes that they would have left at some point in the 20th century, and other people would come there and there would be a dead body. And so do like 12 of those.
I mean, do it. We know how to sell it now. So,
so the thing I have to tell you, what struck me reading it, the first thing that struck me, and this was seriously on the first page, is that I felt that the language was very, very good. And this is something that I think about a lot when I read historical fiction, is I'm very aware of, does this sound like it was written in 2020? Or does it sound like it was written in 1920 or whatever year the book is set in? Because language changes, and it's hard to, I mean, I have a whole bunch of books right here on the shelf next to me that were, written 100 years ago. And I love to pick them up and read them and really try to ask myself, like, it's different, but what makes it different? Like, how do you craft it's not just the words, it's the sentence structure, it's the pace, it's everything, so that it feels like it's of another era. Yeah. So I thought that was terrific. And in your case too, because it had to be British.
Yes.
Yes.
Amy, what was I thinking?
I don't know. I would never do it. I would never do it. If you called me first, I would have said, yeah, don't write that book.
Don't try it. Well, I had a lot of doubt about this project. I mean, that's kind of where I was going there. I'm an American. I'm not a historian. I mean, one of my friends, Susanna Calkins, is a historian. She writes about the 17th century because she knows, the 17th century. Yeah. I was never even, I mean, I've always been interested in history, but in a very casual way, not in a learned way, and not in any dedicated way, and not as a researcher. I have never been a researcher. In fact, I sort of maybe turn down opportunities to learn more on a daily basis. I'm not an instruction manual type of person. My husband's in IT, and basically if there's something that needs to be fixed, I needed a new phone. I'm like, you research it, you decide, and then put it in front of me. And then if I don't know how to use it, teach me how to use it. That's what we're dealing with here. So really a brat when it comes to, digging beneath the surface of anything. So it was kind of a big leap for me personally, but I loved trying to figure it out. It ended up being a little bit of a puzzle that I was not expecting to enjoy.
And so we should say, for anybody who doesn't know, so this is a book that's set very beginning of World War II. Wait, did I say that? It's World War II, right?
World War II, yeah.
Yes, okay. For a minute, I was like, was it World War I? No. It's World War II. Of course, it's World War II. It's a group of children who are evacuated, as many children were. And the house that they end up at is Agatha Christie's house. And this is a true story, but Agatha Christie wasn't really there. Right. So she's not in the book a lot. I mean, when I first started reading it, I was like, oh man, this is going to be like Agatha Christie's world here. But then I understood, and it's based on this true story. So that's the time period. And what I loved about it is, and I immediately skipped to the end and read the historical note first. Because I also write a long historical note, and I've always felt like people should really read it first. If they don't mind a little spoiler here and there, they should really read it first, because it's so crazy to think like, oh wait, these are the things that really happened. And in your case, like you're doing what I do. You're getting into ancestry, and you're figuring out the family trees and researching as much as you can about these children and the nurses and the people and the villagers and who's living on the street and all of that. And it is so deeply pleasurable to kind of go down those rabbit holes and then figure out, like, what can I do with this in terms of fiction, and how can I tell this story so that other people will love it as much as I do, That
was the part that really surprised me, research, not my thing, learning that how research was generative for fiction. Because I guess I kind of thought I'll research it and then I'll write the fiction. And that I didn't, and that I would find the pieces to the characters in history, that I would find out that, for instance, the characters, the butler, Mr. Scaldwell, when his mother died when he was young, his father was put in a workhouse, and then he and his siblings were put into children's homes. And then later and I found them in the census, and they're living with the sister who's married. At this point, the younger brothers were living with their sister who's now married, but there were years missing, and it turns out they were in this children's home, which, I mean, I thought he was a very stoic character. I imagined that he was put off by having to care for this group. But then I realized if he had a childhood like that, maybe he had a little bit softer personality than I had imagined. And I wasn't doing him a service by making him this, not a villain, but this kind of harsh character. He had a soft spot for the children in the end.
Right. I mean, I think this is what happens when you start researching real people, is that they come alive in ways that you could not have imagined. Like I have a character, I mean, Robert Heath, the sheriff who's in a lot of these books, his mother had, oh boy, no, I'm going to forget. I want to say 11 kids, and he was the first one that lived. A whole bunch of them died before he came along and actually made it to adulthood. And so you think about that. You think about, well, what was it like for him growing up in that family? And it just gives him a dimension that I would not have thought of, could not have thought of.
Exactly. I would not have imagined that for Scaldwell, that was part of his character. And I just didn't expect that sort of thing. It was, as you say, deeply pleasurable to find these little nuggets. The other character that the research really revealed, in the register, the 1939 register, was totally valuable because you could see who was at the house on the day that they took the register. This is basically a census for people who are watching of England and Wales just prior to the war, because they were going to use that information for rationing purposes, for the rationing program that they had to develop. And so on a single day, everyone is counted in England and Wales, and you're counted wherever you were. So you would be counted where you lived, if that's where you were, but you might be counted at a friend's house, you might be counted at work. And Agatha and Max, her husband, were counted at Greenway on that day. And then so were some of the household staff, the live-in staff, but also the dailies, and then people down the lane. It was so valuable. There was somebody who was, there was a yacht moored at the down on the quay, and that's where those people were counted on that day. But some of the people in the book, of course, wouldn't have been there yet because the group hadn't come down, and in fact, the butler and cook that Agatha says in her autobiography that she left in the house to help care for the group had not started working for her. So those are people that I had to dig out of history, which was really difficult and daunting, but also like winning a gold medal in first-time historical research to track down these people and confirm that they were the right people.
Right. And so your way into this story was a young woman, a nurse, who's going to be one of the people involved in evacuating these children out to this home. So how did you settle on her as kind of the way into this story?
There were Agatha Christie's autobiography says, well, very little is written about this episode. So I tracked down all the little half sentences that mention that this happened. There's about 3 sentences in Agatha Christie's autobiography about this episode, and maybe 1 sentence later when she's mad at Mr. Arbuthnot, the husband of the woman who made the arrangements. And in that 3-sentence paragraph, it talks about the chaperones and Mrs. Arbuthnot and her husband, the 10 children under 5, which was a devastating fact to come upon. I had been hoping for maybe 5 children at age 10. That would have been ideal. But Agatha dashed my hopes there. And then she said that they were cared for by 2 hospitals, the hospital being the important part. They were not nursery maids. They were nurses, actual nurses, and therefore maybe a little older and more, worldly than they might have been. But there was nothing else known about them. As far as I know, they were lost to history completely. So they became just this blank slate, that I could play with and give them things to do and get them into so much trouble.
And so I'm so jealous because you got to go there.
I did. I went there twice. I went in 2016. I went to England to visit a friend who's English, who was an exchange student in my college many moons ago, just to catch up with her. But also it was a time when Crime Fest was happening. So I decided to sign up to go to Crime Fest in Bristol, where she lived. It was just the most perfect coincidence. And then I did want to go to Greenway because I had this story idea sort of in my back pocket. I had discovered this little half sentence in a book by John Curran called The Secret Notebooks of Agatha Christie, saying as though everyone knew that this had happened. And I needed to read that story, but nobody had written it. So, I had it in my back pocket for years and years thinking, it can't be me. It has to be somebody else who takes the story on. And I had other books to write, I had other contracts to fulfill. And maybe someday, I thought, maybe someday I'll write this book. And so I got to go to England, and my friend drove us down to Greenway to just check it out, see what was going on, see if this story, if I could discover anything. Maybe somebody's already written it and, it's available in the gift shop, but it was not. And there was very little about the children in the house. There was one mention in it had been photocopied and put into little sleeves, and you could flip through the books in the library with a picture of a little girl about 6 years old named Doreen. And she had written a letter back to Greenway House to say, this is what I remember about being a Greenway back. Oh. And it was huge to actually see the face of one of the children, to know her name, her last name especially, became very useful later on when I tracked her son down on Facebook and became pen pals with her by email. But the docent said, well, there's one other thing. And so they took us upstairs to unlock a door near Agatha's bedroom where her furs and her clothes still hung. And there's a cabinet in the room. When you open the doors on the shelves, the names of the 5 girls were still etched on the shelves. And Amy, the story became my story at that moment. I needed to at least see if it could be told.
Yeah.
And then I went back. So in between 2019, I went back in 2019, and then in between those 2 trips, I was trying to write it. I was researching it and trying to figure it out, and had done not a full draft, I don't think at this point, but had something sort of cooking, and knew a little bit more about what I didn't know and what I needed to know. And a lot of that was actually walking around the space, walking around the grounds, especially because we hadn't been able to do the grounds on the first trip. So I got the chance to go because Sophie Hannah, who you might also know, came to Chicago to do the event that I run here, Midwest Mystery Conference, it's now called. And I had the chance to tell her about this story, and she said, oh, you have to talk to Belinda. And so she put me in touch with Belinda, who worked for the National Trust, and I was invited to come stay at the house for 3 nights just to walk around. And
oh my God.
It was, Amy, I'm not going to lie, it's the best writer perk I've ever had to hang out at Agatha's. And you can rent out on the top floor, the National Trust does rentals. And so you can rent a space in the top floor. I think there are maybe 3 apartments that you can rent. But there's this room called the Bedsit, which is small. It's really a 1-person room, but I did invite my husband to come with me. I like him that much. And we just lived there. There were people on the top floor, but they were there to do, a tour of the River Dart, or, to do some walking in the hills, or, whatever it is that people do at Dartmouth. And we were there to be Agatha and Max. We just lived at the house, but we also walked into the town, the nearest town. We took the ferry across to the little town across the river. We just did all the things that I needed to know so that the nurses could do it.
Right.
And it was great.
Did the ghost of Agatha Christie come and whisper in your ear at night? Is that a thing that happens?
Maybe that's a perk you get if you rent the top floor. It didn't happen in the bedsit, I'm afraid.
Oh.
It was probably a servant's room, if nothing else. So maybe one of the servants that I had written about or learned about might have come and talked to me, but no,
Oh,
right not.
that's incredible. And it's also incredible that you've gotten to actually speak to real people who are in this story, connected with this story. And I had a little touch of that with my Kopp novels as well. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you, for me, what's so weird about that is that after a while, I start to believe that I've made all this up, because it exists in my head as this imaginary thing. And then to be talking to someone who was there, or who knew the person who was there, who I can ask questions to, like I can actually ask them what my characters did or thought or how they reacted, and they have a real world answer. It's bizarre. It's like these human crystal balls in a way. It's the strangest feeling. I don't know. Is that how you felt? Like, what was that like for you?
I mean, yes, getting to talk to Doreen is amazing. And just emailing, out into the void. And then the little girl who was, a year and a half old when she went to Greenway and then went home, they were sort of kicked out of the house by requisition, and military moved in because the River Dart was actually one of the staging areas for Operation Overlord. And so they went to a couple other places, and then she didn't go home until she was 6. Now she saw her parents, they visited, and it's a long time for a little kid to be away from home. But getting to talk to her made me understand that not all evacuee stories are sad stories. When people talk and hear about what it's about, and maybe they've never heard of the program before, 3 million people were moved out of the metropolitan areas, and many of them were children moved away from their parents. And many people think, oh, they're orphans. No, most of them had parents, and their parents wanted them to be safe. So they get kind of teary about that. And yes, I don't have children. I'm sure it was a heartbreak, but it was also to try to keep them safe from what was, a horrible bombing of London, especially. So, but getting to talk to her, it made me realize it didn't have to be a sad story. She actually said that she felt loved the whole time and felt safe. And all she remembers of Greenway, well, she remembers many things, which she listed in her letter, and I used as much as possible. She felt safe and cared for and had an amazing time, and missed her friends, missed her little playmates when she went back home.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting also, I think, to think about what it was like for England going into World War II. For us, like our experience of World War I and World War II is that we went over there. But for them, the memory of World War I was, of course, still very fresh. And so on one hand, they're thinking like, oh, here we go again. Yeah. And also this sense that the war's going to happen on their home territory. Like I'm trying to imagine me here in Portland anticipating that we're going to get bombed. And where do we go? Is there someplace safe? Yeah. Is there somewhere out in the countryside where you can go and not have bombs dropped on your house? And to think about organizing that and getting ready for that, and just anticipating it and doing it. And also just this whole thing about country homes being requisitioned. Yes. I mean, somebody watching this has a country home. I'm sure somebody has a place out at the lake or a whatever. So I want you to imagine this, like it just sort of gets taken. Like we're going to have soldiers staying here, or this is going to be a field hospital, or this is going to be, an orphanage, or a place for evacuated children, or it's a this or that. And that decision has been made. And so you go, and we're going to be here. Like,
Agatha really fought the requisition of her house. I mean, obviously she didn't want it used for anything. She had already rented it out. So, it was taken, but she didn't have much of a choice. She fought it as long as she could, and then had to give in. And then, so the children left and went to somewhere else. And then the sailors moved. Well, the military came in and put in 14 latrines. 14 latrines where the larder is now, where they store food. Nice. Now. Interesting. And then what else did they do? Agatha was allowed to keep one room where all her furniture could be shoved into. And that is the drawing room, if anyone's been there. It's not that big of a room, to be honest, but she was able to store things that couldn't be moved there. And then everything else in the house had to be taken out so that it was filled with U.S. Coast Guard officers. That's who actually stayed in the house.
Wow.
And they were getting ready for Operation Overlord. And at one point, all the ships were backed up, into the river estuary. And then, on the moment when the call came, they started, drifting out. And we don't really think about the getting ready part of
Right.
D-Day, but they had to be staged somewhere. The ships all met kind of in a water staging area, and then went out to all the beaches that they landed on.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to realize that about World War I as well, because I have two of my Kopp Sisters novels are set in World War I, sort of the run up to it, and then the war itself. The two right before the new one, and we got into the war late, World War I. We got in late. We didn't want to go. We didn't want to be a part of it. Finally, Wilson decides, all right, we're going to go. And then General Pershing, who is in charge, he doesn't want to go till he's got a full army. He doesn't want to send over a unit in dribs and drabs. He doesn't want his people under the control of the French or the English. He wants his own people. And he just says, I think the French and the Brits can hold off the Germans for another year. Can you imagine? I mean, the French were probably like, are you kidding me? We've been holding them off. So anyway, it took a full year for us to get over there. And sure enough, once we came over, I mean, it ended fair. It was brutal, but it was also over pretty quickly by that time. But yeah, an incredible amount of run up to that, and to build this army and all the equipment to get over to France, to lay railroad tracks, to put in roads, to put in telephone lines. I mean, they had to wire up the whole country. Like they built this infrastructure. They put plumbing and running water into villages that didn't have it, just to function, just to be able to function, to do this thing. So yeah, it's a crazy amount of logistical stuff. That
I managed to find something online that I think is cool. I don't know if any other people will think it's cool, but there's a partial map of this area that Greenway is in, a military map that shows where all the facilities were put in, and it's called Area K. That's what this area was called that Greenway was in. It was just interesting to me to see how many people would have been required. This was not part of the story when I started writing about children playing at Greenway. It seemed like a bed knobs and broomsticks at Agatha Christie's house, but then it they weren't old enough for that. And then all this military stuff crept in, and it ended up being part of the story because I realized the villagers are going to be noticing these things.
Right.
The villagers have to be noticing these things, and it wasn't a major part of the story, but the fact that these the people who are there to make trouble are there for their own reasons, and all the people who are there are starting to get a little suspicious of what's going on. They don't know, they don't know why it's happening. They just know that there's a lot of strangers in town, which is opportunity for me, obviously. I wanted to ask you about the beginnings of the Kopp Sisters. I think it was a research discovery, was it not, that got you started on this journey?
It was, yeah. It was when I was working on Drunken Botanist, and there's actually a gin smuggler, a real person who is a gin smuggler named Henry Kaufman, who's in the Drunken Botanist. And I was just trying to look up to see who he was and what else he had done and decide whether his story was going in the Drunken Botanist or not. And someone with that same name gets into a car accident involving the Kopp sisters. And that just sort of led me, down this rabbit hole of who these three sisters were, which was a lot of Ancestry and a lot of newspapers.com, just newspaper articles and, all those old records. And once I started piecing their lives together, no one knew who they were. I mean, these were not people who were in any way known. There was no Wikipedia page about them. There was nothing. And I just thought, well, anyone could have found them, but I'm the one who found them. So I started to feel, an obligation to do something with this, to tell their story.
So people are asking me, or have always asked me, why I wanted to adhere so closely to the history. Like when I was frustrated that the children were too young, or, the house got requisitioned, I didn't have to write it that way. I don't really know why. to be honest, because I am a fiction writer. I am not, of course, as I mentioned, a historian, but there was something about, because it hadn't been written about before,
Right.
I did feel a little bit of an obligation to try to get it. If I could find a fact that I knew was true, that I could actually confirm, I was going to use it. Yeah. And it did box me in story-wise. Mm-hmm. It boxed me in a great deal. Did you have that kind of experience as well?
Yeah, that's how I felt about it, is if I knew it really happened, I wanted to keep it and I wanted to use it, because that was the point. It's not like I woke up one morning and thought, I should write historical fiction about a woman in law enforcement from 100 years ago. Now let me go shopping for one. I mean, I wasn't planning on doing this book. So yeah, I really wanted to stick to the truth as much as possible. And where I deviated from it, I had a reason for it. And sometimes that reason was that I just got too boxed in. Like, I killed off the Kopp sisters' mother a few years prematurely because I just didn't know what to do with 4 women living under one roof. They were driving me crazy. I just was like, I can't, the 4 of you, it's too many different, like 3 of you can disagree with one another and it's a triangle and I can manage the conflicts in a triangle. But with a square, you've got like multiple triangles of conflict going on, and it was just too much. So I just was like, well, I'm sorry, Mrs. Kopp, but yeah, you're gone. I'm putting you in the grave. So I did, and I actually
brutal.
I know, and in this book, in real life, their brother did die, but I did actually kill him off just a bit prematurely as well. For timing, I wanted it to be immediately post-war, not like a year or 2 later. So I do have a habit, I think, of sending people to just a little bit of an early grave.
Ouch.
So yeah.
Ouch. You're cruel.
Yeah.
I'm learning. I wanted to be your friend, but now I'm not sure.
No. Yeah, watch out.
Well, we are getting close to the time. So
yes.
John, if you want to come back and we can see if there are any questions that we want to answer.
Yeah, there are. And so I wanted to say, you mentioned earlier, Lori, that this whole thing was a plot for you and Amy to get to be friends. That's literally the way we set up our events. We're like, oh, who do we like? It's like, oh, who haven't we seen in a while that we want to catch up with? Or, I think this person is especially long. It's totally all about like, let's make friends.
It's so selfish. I just wanted to hang out with Amy, and thank you all for letting me do that.
So we've got some good questions. So the first one is actually a little bit of a craft research question. She says, sorry, Lori, I have a process question. How did the history research work with crafting the story? Did you envision what was going to happen and then you would get the details? You touched on this a little bit, or were you kind of more guided by the details as you were researching?
Yeah, I kind of joked at the beginning that I didn't want people to ask about the process, especially for this book, because I am what we call a pantser, right? I don't know how Amy falls on this scale, but it's the same bone that abhors research. It's all the prep work. I am not a prep work kind of person, and I had to get over that for this book because I did need to do some research. I had to sort of start to get in to the story and at the time period. So I read a lot of books. I surrounded myself with music. This is the part I like. I like making the playlist for my project and listening to, swing music from the early 40s, but it needed to be British, right? Not British, but it needed to be popular enough that it would be heard in Britain, which was key. But it was a lot of give and take. So I would research something and start writing and then realize through the research that I had got it wrong. For instance, a Mrs. Arbuthnot is what Agatha called the woman who rented the house from her. A Mrs. Arbuthnot. Thank you, Agatha, for no first name. That was very helpful. And so I went looking for this couple, and I thought I would be able to. I found a couple named Arbuthnot who lived in the same exact area of London that these children did, and I thought, well, this is a miracle. This is great. This is who they are. And they were interesting. They were a young couple. He was actually in the military in the RAF or did we say RAF? I should probably know that by now, but the Air Force, the Royal Air Force. And she was an actress, which I found, that is something I can work with, right? The problem was I found out by triangulating some sources that they were actually the wrong ones. They were the wrong Arbuthnot's, or the Arbuthnot's, as I call them now. And that was, I mean, I didn't have a full novel at that time. I didn't have a full draft, but I lost maybe 15,000 words that I had written about her. Some of them actually were useful later, but not everything. I had to sort of give up and start over again when I learned that they were a much older couple, the actual couple, and I was able to confirm that they were the actual couple through research and a little bit of help with somebody I met through Ancestry.com. I made a friend on Ancestry.com. That's what my life is now. But it was a give and take, right? Do you feel the same way, Amy? You research, you write, you find something new, you back up, maybe come at it from a lot of different directions?
Yeah, I mean, I had a habit from my nonfiction books of wanting to do all the research first and save the writing until very late in the game. So I had my kind of research habits and methods. Like I use Evernote to keep track of everything, so I know everything's all in one place. But yes, there are forever things you have to go and look up. It's always like, wait a minute, was Wyoming a state yet? You know, and you go down the rabbit hole of Wyoming history. So it's always something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So Kathy wants to know, Lori, she says something she learned about in the book that surprised her was that Agatha Christie didn't interact with the children or the adults. Did your research indicate why she might not have interacted with them?
She interacts with Mrs. Arbuthnot. This was a business arrangement to her, renting the house. And she soon went to London to be near Max, who was doing war work, and soon was doing war work herself. She, in World War I, had become an apothecary's assistant. This is where she learned about poisons. This is the start of her career in World War I. So for World War II, she dusted off her skills and contacted the University Hospital in London and had a job. She had a part-time job, maybe more like full-time, and also wrote books. I don't know how she did it. I'm a little jealous of her work ethic, but it was a big deal for people to do their bit, to do something that would help out for the war effort. And so that's what she did. She worked as a pharmacist, basically, in a hospital. But she, I think, not interacting with the children was a decision I made because I don't think she did. Having talked to Doreen doesn't remember Agatha Christie. And I wasn't even sure she was going to be in the house when the kids arrived. I think that she would have been, again, because of this business arrangement, the rental to the Arbuthnot's. But I also thought she is going to get the heck out of there. She was writing books. Can you imagine trying to write a book in a house that had 10 children under the age of 5? No, I don't think that would have worked very well. It's a big house, but it's not a Downton Abbey-esque house. It is a rather normal sized house with three stories. So that was a decision. But I also wanted to use that to piss off Mr. Arbuthnot. So she did not like him. That is clear if you read her autobiography. She did not. He set a chair on fire at one point. That's in the book. That really happened. So I just had this feeling that Agatha was not a fan of the Arbuthnot's in the end. So, which you can tell by reading the autobiography. So I just got that started by having her shut him out.
So Kathy also wants to know, have there been any nonfiction books about the evacuees at Greenway, or are you the first? Or is yours the first book to address it? Because she says as much as she loved Agatha Christie, she felt like she should have known about that, but didn't.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I was reading the John Curran book. There is no single book that really takes this on. I found various one-sentence, half-sentence references to the house being used by evacuees, but only by pulling it all together did you get any sense of what that was like. And then the best resource was Doreen's letter that she sent to the National Trust or to Greenway. I'm not sure exactly how. It would have been the National Trust, I guess. And then the National Trust shared that with the BBC because they had just started a huge renovation preservation of the house. And so they got the BBC to come film Doreen and her husband visiting the house again. So Doreen got to visit it was under construction, so she couldn't see maybe, as she would like to see now, but she got to go to the room where her little bed would have been and to sit, and she looks at the camera and says, I sort of dug at the paint here and made a little pile of dust, and and it was that letter. The BBC posted like bullet points, the things that she remembered, and that was the single most useful resource. Her letter, and then of course the person.
So, Amy, we've talked about the Kopp sisters a little bit. Do you think that people, if they want to read the series, do you think that they can, should they start with Girl Waits with Gun, or do you think that they can jump in with Miss Kopp Investigates?
You don't have to start at the beginning. I always try to write these in such a way that you could pick any of them up and they're self-contained as a novel. You'll obviously have a sense of, I think there's a whole past here, so as long as you know that, and you don't mind that, you'll be able to just, it stands on its own, I think.
Okay.
But you're going to want to read them all. I mean, let's just be honest. The Girl Waits with Gun is a fabulous book and so fun. We need some fun in our lives right now. I think you should all buy all of them and get that free shipping that John was talking about.
Yeah, Lori, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is like you're definitely going to want to read all of them. They're delightful, and one of the things that we've said about them is
they're over my shoulder. I have a stack of them. They're hard to see because they're white, but that is a stack of Kopp sister books that I have and treasure.
Yeah. So you can't say each other's books because we have established that you have read each other's books and you are fans of each other. What is something that you've read lately that you've loved? Let's start with Lori.
I loved Laura McHugh's latest book, What's Done in Darkness. It's fabulous. I'm sure that John can point you where you can get a copy of that. I'm reading Julia Dahl's new book, The Missing Hours, and it's great. And then I just bought this today. I read a lot of nonfiction. I love Susan Orlean, and basically anything Susan Orlean writes, I'll read. The Library Book by Susan Orlean is one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books. But
Listen, I am, for those watching, I am dropping links to those in the chat as we are going. How about you, Amy? What have you read lately that you loved?
What a bookseller. Well, I have to say I've been reading a lot of very old books. So whether they're available in print right now or not, I'm not sure. Marjorie Sharp is a novelist that I love. Who she's a British novelist who wrote what today we would call women's fiction, kind of Agatha Christie's generation for sure. And I've just been reading her books over and over again because I find them very reassuring, and I tend to wake up at 3 a.m. and just need to read something wonderful to fall back asleep. And then also Stella Gibbons, who wrote Cold Comfort Farm, has written a ton of books, and you can find them. And they're sort of these lovely escapist British stories that revolve around women off, I don't know, in the countryside doing something or other. And I've just kind of devoured a stream of them because they've just sort of taken me away from the stresses of the last year. So I'm sorry, there's nothing new on my reading list right now. It's all decades old.
But Stella Gibbons, they can get Cold Comfort Farm if they haven't read that. I love that book. It's so
if you haven't read
funny.
Cold Comfort Farm, it's such a treat. It's a little dessert of a book. You must.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it so much. And then you in your newsletter, your Opera newsletter, I go back to again, you do some recommendations there. And you were talking about an author named Ursula Orange. Is that right?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's another. And then those are available. That would be, you seem to enjoy those. I can't remember the title of the one that you talked about, but I bought it because you were talking about it. I mean, again, your newsletter works. And I was like, I'm going to click and buy that.
Wow, you're paying so much attention.
I am.
She's actually another one of those kind of authors of another generation and another time. And yeah, I don't know. That's just what I seem to need right now.
That makes sense to me. Comfort reading, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, totally.
We've seen, actually kind of pulling it back to Agatha, we've seen since early days last year in the pandemic that like we could not keep Agatha Christie books in stock because they're just comfort for people. So people would just come in and just like, I mean, we would order them all in like 2s and 3s of each of them. And then like within a month or two, we're like, how are there no Agatha Christie's on the shelf again? We actually just got restocked again and make sure we have them for the holidays, but people have been really turning to stuff like that.
Oh yeah. I
Well,
read
I
all
mean-
the Miss Marples as soon as COVID started. I just read all the Miss Marples. It was the first thing I did.
Well, I was a little busy when the pandemic struck. I had just gotten my edit letter back from my editor, and I decided, no, I'm going to do more. I'm going to actually rewrite the entire thing from the ground up. So it wasn't. I don't know if comforting is the right word. It was challenging and stressful, but I'm glad I did, because now it is a book that might bring comfort. So if anybody runs out of Agatha Christie books, hey, I got an idea for you.
Yeah.
Visit Agatha's house.
Yeah, your book definitely has that vibe. I mean, it had that for me. It just felt like the kind of book that you could just sink into, and just the kind of world that you could sort of safely escape to. It was lovely in that way.
It was that and puzzles, which I bought from Murder by the Book. That and British baking. That was my life for a while. Yeah.
I will say also, Helen Simonson, I think, is another one of those authors. Summer Before the War is a delightful, not even though it's before the war, one of those delightful kind of escapist novels that I read again just recently.
What is her book that came out before that? I loved that one.
Major Pettigrew's Stand. But that was her big one. But I really loved Summer Before the War even more. They're both wonderful.
Yeah.
Lori, did you go back and reread any Agatha Christie's while you were working on this or before you started working on it?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you get to call reading Agatha Christie research, yeah, you're gonna do that. So I read all the books that she wrote during the war. I read the ones that she published during the war. And then I made sure that I read the ones that I knew that she had used Greenway as a reference point. So Dead Man's Folly is probably the best example of that. I think it was published in 56, something like that, 52, 56. But it is set at Greenway. Now she changed the name of the place. She, she put a Folly on the grounds that I don't think ever was there. It isn't there now. But she describes the place. She describes the boathouse. She uses people, I swear to you, she uses people who lived on the estate that she owned, because there's a family that sort of does, some of them do the gardening, some of them do the ferry, not the ferry, but they actually live in the ferry house and help in the kitchen. The Bastons is who they really were. But in the book, there are people who bear a strange resemblance of the family structures and what jobs they had and who they married and that sort of thing. So she was definitely using her own life to fictionalize. And in fact, that's an Ariadne Oliver book, which is the character that she created that is in some ways herself. She talks in this book, Ariadne says she was about to go talk to like a ladies group about how to write books, and Poirot arriving saves her from having to go do that, because writers can't possibly shouldn't have anything to say about writing books except you write it and then it's done. So Agatha was never going to do a how-to apparently, but that book I read it twice because it was describing Greenway in her words, how she would describe Greenway, what words she would use to describe what it looks like and how it is. So
awesome. So before we head out this evening, can you guys give the readers a little hint about what you're working on or what you've got coming up next? How about you, Amy?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm not writing another Kopp novel. I have left them in a very good place. If you get to the end of Miss Kopp Investigates, you'll find out in real life what they're going to be doing in the 20s. And so it's a very good place to, that I can come back to and start up again someday. Mm-hmm. But I took a big break during COVID, which I very much needed. I've never I used to be a person who worked 7 days a week. For years, I was like that. And then I took a crazy amount of time off in the last year. And at the end of that, I decided that I wanted to write a book that I could also illustrate. So so I just made a deal with Random House for a book on tree collectors. which is an idea that I've had in the back of my mind for about 10 years because I met somebody who told me he was a tree collector. And I was like, that's a very weird thing to collect because they're kind of big and hard to move. So I've been thinking about this forever. And then suddenly when I conceived of it as an illustrated book, it sort of made a lot of sense. So this is just as of a couple of weeks ago that we kind of made our deal. And now I'm gainfully employed again. So that's what's going on. Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a tree collector, Amy.
What? Stop it.
I mean, I don't grow them. I have one. But what I mean by that is when I see a picture of a beautiful tree or big tree usually, or, you know, the redwoods, the ones that have names, the ones that are sort
like
of
the General Sherman Sequoia.
Yes, the destination trees. I have a little collection of you know, snapshots that I'm sort of saving that I would like to visit. Many of them are in California. So I think a trip to California, I could scoop up about 3 or 4 of these trees.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to see. I just wanted to see them.
This is totally going to be a thing in my book, like where you can go to see some of the champion trees and the notable trees.
The oldest tree that, you know, the one that they can date, you know.
Yeah.
It's 3,000, 4,000 years old. I'm here for this book. I'm all about this book.
That's fantastic.
All about it.
Wow. I've sold one, John.
Yay!
I'm going to call my editor right now.
Call Random House. Sold one already.
You guys are going to be okay. I'm working on this. Yeah.
And have potentially set up a potential blurb for it. There you go.
Oh, there you go.
Yep.
I'll be calling you.
Okay. I would love to help you with this in any way I can. I don't actually have a next project. It's not causing me pain yet because I think after this challenging, I think it's a nice safe word to say this book has been challenging for me. I can say now that there's joy built into the process, that it's a joyful book in the end. But it was a tough process for me. So I'm taking a little bit of a break. Just to
Refilling
see
the creative well, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and just see what occurs to me. Nothing has really been singing to me yet. So when the next idea starts talking to me, I'll be ready. But for now, I'm just, reading some books, catching up on my Kopp Sisters, for instance. Yeah.
We should do an author series of authors on break.
Yeah.
Who are all like, I'm...
Let's talk about something else. What else do you want to talk about?
I go for walks. I don't know. I have this new stretching routine. I guess I could share that to you.
I mean, put it in your newsletter. I'll read it.
That would be what we do.
If you put it in your newsletter, I will absolutely read that. Yeah.
Awesome. So to recap for anybody who might have joined us late, we have been chatting with Lori Rader-Day, whose book Death at Greenway just came out on Tuesday. As I mentioned, we've got signed book plates to go with our copies of it. And we've also been joined by Amy Stewart, who writes the Kopp Sisters books, the first of which is Girl Waits with Gun, and the newest, Miss Kopp Investigates, just came out in September. We've got copies of both and previous books in store, so you can visit us at murderbooks.com to order. If you missed any part of our chat, once we're done, Facebook and YouTube will archive them so you can rewatch. Sometimes YouTube takes just a smidge longer to get it up there, but it'll definitely be up. And while you're there, definitely search around for all the other great events we've done. I didn't mention this when we got started, but if you are interested in hearing about another mystery set at an Agatha Christie house, Colleen Cambridge has a book called Murder at Malowin Hall coming out at the end of October. And it is about one of the Agatha Christie's head of household who is actually solving a murder at the house. And I'm going to be chatting with her on October 27th. So if you guys are looking for more Agatha Christie house murder.
I have questions.
Yeah, you have questions? Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Because there is no house named Malowin Hall.
Oh.
I'm going to be watching so I can ask her.
Okay, perfect. So, and clearly I need to brush up a little bit on my Agatha Christie knowledge before. I say as I shame myself as a mystery bookseller there.
Well, that would be a great research project for you, John.
Yeah, definitely. So, Lori, Amy, thank you so much. This was so delightful. I'm so glad that we were able to pair you guys up, and it was so great to get to sit back and watch this chat this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
Thank you, John. So good to see your face.
You too. You guys take care, and hopefully next time you guys have stuff out, we'll actually be able to do this in store and get to see you and hug, and like you said, go have Mexican food and margaritas afterwards.
Yes. Totally.
Yes. Let's do that.
Yes, definitely. Y'all take care.
Okay.
Bye. Thank you, Amy.